Well, Amoris Laetitia, the joy of love, is an exhortation from Pope Francis attempting to reconcile modern family life with church teaching. It's long on sympathy for people struggling with their conscience over being divorced or using contraception or loving someone of the same sex, but it hasn't changed any of the Roman Catholic Church's doctrine on any of the key issues that people or the planet have to deal with on a daily basis. And maybe this is not a surprise, because the joy of love was based on discussions held over the past 3 years across the world, largely between men, celibate men. Yet most of the worshippers in Catholic churches every Sunday are married women. Their views and experience of modern family life are more informed. But women cannot be Catholic priests, and none hold senior positions within the Vatican or the worldwide church. Should the Vatican give women more power? Caroline, we've got a situation with Pope Francis, 79-year-old, possibly a virgin, definitely celibate. What does he or any of the other old virgins know about women?
Well,
how can they possibly opine?
For a start, every single Catholic priest has got a mother, haven't they? So, and they've perhaps got sisters. So you're sort of making the assumption that in order to know about women, you need to have had a sexual relationship with them, which I think
family life as well.
Yeah,
having children.
But of course,
contraception.
Of course, they would have been brought up within a family with women. I think you're kind of. The question assumes that Catholic doctrine is formed by a sort of political party think tank in the Vatican. You know, and if you got more women in there, church doctrine would change. Well, that's not the case. That's not how doctrine is formed, and therefore Catholic doctrine is unlikely to change. Now, when you talk about giving women more power, as you say, women make up most of the congregations of the Catholic Church. When I look at my parish and my diocese, for example, arguably the most important person in the diocese is the finance director. They make all the decisions, the budgeting. They're probably the most important layperson in the diocese. We've just got a new one, and she's a woman.
Wow. The doctrine is not immutable. That's the point. Let me bring in Miriam here. Miriam Dignan from the Catholic Women's Ordination. You said that women are treated as a different species in the Catholic Church. What do you say to Caroline? What do you say to the rest of us?
Well, treated as a different species in that the ban on women's ordination is not new, but it also doesn't reflect the original teaching of the Church and the original foundations of the faith, when women were equal leaders along with men. And it also doesn't reflect the teaching of Jesus, who went out of his way and totally went against the norms of his time to ask women to speak on his behalf. So what we need now is that the Church reflects the justice and the equality that we teach.
Were it to do that, were the, not just the finance directors, but with the personnel all the way up in the Vatican hierarchy to change and more accurately reflect society, how would doctrine change?
Well, it would be easy to change the doctrine of the Church.
What would be better? What changes for the better would there be?
If you look at the Synod, you mentioned the Synod, this recent document as a result of all of these discussions, where there were a few women that were allowed in, but they were very carefully chosen women who were only allowed to talk about natural family planning. And all of the bishops were voting. There was not a single woman allowed to vote. So it has real impact on our teaching in the world. There are 1.2 billion Catholics worldwide. And our church is the largest non-governmental provider of healthcare and education in the world. So it has real impact. When you are still saying in 2016 that artificial contraception, medical contraception is banned as a result of the discussions in this synod, because none of the bishops said that they believe the teaching of the Church needs to change, and that's what it requires. There are real impacts for women not being able to participate in those discussions with a voice and with a vote. It's because that does then spread throughout the world. Very large influence in the world on governments in the United Nations, where there are real impacts, and women suffer disproportionately from violence, from poverty, from abuse in the world. And the Catholic Church, if they would just say, we want to restore you to full equality, we want you to have a voice in the Church as you used to, as Jesus modeled in asking you to speak for him, then it would lift up women and instantly change the status of women all around the world in the areas that we are all worried about.
I would say that women actually do have roles as leaders within the Catholic Church. So I look at my particular parish. I see women leading First Holy Communion classes, confirmation classes, catechists. We have women teaching in seminaries who are in charge of the formation of the priests. And actually, you're assuming that a priest or a cleric is the only person who can exercise any power. Actually, the role of priest within the Catholic Church, and I know my husband is one, is a role of servant.
And he's former CAV, so he has children, and he's come across, so he's been the beneficiary of that dispensation. Let me give you a quote. This is from Andrew Pinsent, who's a leading Catholic, who has been on this programme. He said that the role of women in the church is like a dancing partner. The man leads and the woman follows, but the woman is the centre of attention. Now, OK, but if somebody said that in politics or in the boardroom, they would be laughed at, and it would be seen as fantastically patronising.
Well, it's to do with complementarity, okay? So, and you talked about, which is, you know, both sexes should be of equal importance. And you talked about Amoris Laetitia and, you know, how women weren't included or it needed to be better. Actually, Pope Francis specifically spoke out about the plight of women. He talked about where women have been enslaved, and he rejected patriarchal cultures. He said women are still enslaved today by the sex industry, by surrogacy. He actually said where women's emancipation has led to equal access in the workplace and to equal decision-making, this is the work of the Holy Spirit. It does hold back
women's education, doesn't it? Because the countries which have the most educated female workforce are the countries that are the most successful in the world. Anyone else on the front row, or indeed in the audience, wants to come in? Lembit, you've been dying. Frank, I'll be with you in a second. Lembit?
I work with a group called the Motorcycle Action Group, and my boss is a woman, and the chair, Selina Lavender, is a woman. The most powerful motorcyclist in the country is a woman. If you said, oh, it's a man's world on bikes, you would be laughed out of the organisation. My church, Oasis in London, would consider it unthinkable to judge who does what in the church on the basis of gender. It's about faith, not about body.
But the thing is, the role of a priest, I think we're getting a bit confused, because the role of the priest, as the Catholic Church sees it, is a vocation. It's not a job. It's not a secular job, you know, that's paid and with employment. And it's to do with the Church's theology. So the Church sort of sees herself as feminine. The Church is the bride, and Christ is the bridegroom, and that's why we have a male priesthood.
Miriam, you're kind of making a fun. Well, Miriam, you're making a straight. Frank in a second, yes. But I just want to react to it. Miriam, sort of, you contorted your face when you made a point.
The bridegroom theology is a bit troubling, and it's only been used recently. Once there was a commission in the Vatican, called in the Vatican in 1976. To settle the question once and for all, is there anything in Scripture that would exclude women from being priests? And the Vatican's own commission said there is nothing in Scripture that says women cannot be priests, so we need to come up with something else. Now, the development of the theory of the bridegroom has grown since then. It was started to be mentioned in the 1980s by John Paul II a lot. In one of his letters, I think it was mentioned nearly 30 times.
Mentioned by St Paul as well, didn't it? A little bit earlier than that, I think. Wasn't St Paul a little bit earlier than the 1970s?
St Paul started
he was a bit,
the bridegroom, but it was not used in the Catholic Church.
Welcome, Joseph. Good to see you.
The Catholic Church banned women from the altar in around 1150. So
that is complete fantasy.
Is that complete fantasy, Joseph?
There isn't a scholar of a theologian or a scriptural scholar in the country with a university of any reputation who would agree with that. That is total
Canon Law
fantasy.
1024 was written into the Code of Canon Law
That's
in
as may be. That wasn't the beginning
and you
of
only need to
the exclusion of women.
Something when it's
Complete
happening
fantasy.
already.
Joseph, you're chairman of the Latin. Frank can just say, Joseph grabbed it, but I'll be with you. You're chairman of the Latin Mass Society, which you believe is increases the mystery of the sacraments. Yeah.
Yes, the Latin Mass. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think there's
Latin,
a good deal of confusion here.
Does that not alienate people?
The Latin.
Latin. Yeah. No.
No, it doesn't actually, because what you do when you come into church for Mass is you want to worship God, and it's what's addressed to God doesn't have to be in English; it has to be in something which has a certain grandeur.
You say more males respond to it.
Well, yes, we would. This is something which we can observe. The fact is that. And this is a very two-edged thing. You've said yourself, well, a lot of these congregations, they seem to be rather female-dominated. Well, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And all these women, and why aren't they being represented in the church? Well, hang on a minute. Another way of looking at it is that where have the men gone? And if this is such a male-dominated institution, an institution which is serving only men, how is it that they've instituted a form of liturgy and many other policies which actually turn men off to such an extent?
Because it's too what? Why does it turn them off?
It turns them off because it's touchy-feely. You're invited to, you hug your neighbour, all this sort of thing. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit. The fact is that we have a situation where about a third of congregations are male, and many of those men are dragged there.
You don't think there's a problem for women in the Catholic Church at all, do you?
Oh, I do. I think there are many problems for women in the Catholic Church, and one of them is the problem that we've had here from this push for female ordination, which is confusing the issue of power in the community with the question of ordination. Now, I'm a layman.
Frank, but the issue, I mean, you talked about the synod, yes, and the cardinals and bishops, when they gathered in Rome, yes, they were male. Before those synods, both in 2014 and 2015, the Catholic Church went out and did a consultation through every bishops' conference around the world. A call to action helped the bishops' conference here in England and Wales. We had responses. The responses don't make good reading for the Pope and for the bishops, because it showed 85% of Catholics, practicing Catholics, didn't accept the Church's teaching on contraception. 95% of the people who responded believed that divorced Catholics should be welcomed back into communion with the Church. So what the Pope, and he admits it, at the beginning of the Joy of Love, he makes the point, the Church has not responded adequately to the demands and the needs of the laity. So it's not just a question of women. I understand the aspirations of women to have a further role in the Church, but actually it's about the 99% of the Catholic Church who are lay members. The Church is the laity. It is not just the priests and bishops.
Right, lady there, in the Tottenham shirt, yeah.
The way that I see it
is... women's business in the Church, and also in terms of contraception and sexual autonomy and so forth.
I think that as a woman, if I am passionate about something, if I care about something, whether it's faith, politics, healthcare, why should I not be able to rise to the position that I want to? Whether it's a priest, a cleric, the Pope, I should be able to do that. And I should also have the autonomy to be able to choose the contraception that I want to use for my health.
You do. No, the Pope, the Catholic Church teaches what she teaches about contraception, and actually she teaches it for a very specific reason. It's absolutely not about oppression. But you have free will. You have your own free will. Now, the Catholic Church says, OK, we believe that sex is about this and that. It's about unity and procreation. It's two elements. But you can reject that. The Church is not imposing what she believes on contraception about you. And in fact, the
clearly,
Church...
because most people don't follow it nor agree with it.
But also, the Church is saying, it does say to women, no, the Church says to women, it doesn't say every time you have sex, you must have a baby. And there is the concept of responsible parenthood, which has been advocated.
Let the lady come back on that, yeah.
I think that when it comes to sex, yes, I absolutely do have a choice about the contraceptions that I use. But then actually you look at the whole wider teachings in that maybe, yeah, I use the contraception that I want, but then I can't go into a job that I want within the church because of my gender. And how is that fair? How is that equal?
But what job do you want?
It's not just a job. I mean, it has a sacred character. This is something which has been given to us by...
Why are women any less sacred? Why do we have any less rights?
The reason we're having this conversation is because after all this discussion over the last 3 years, the Pope has said, well, actually, boys and girls, I can't change the teaching. So you think, oh, the Pope's got all the power, the Cardinal's got all, they can change teaching. Actually, they can't. They can't. They weren't able to do it.
Wait, what's your name?
Kitty.
Kitty, what would you say to Joseph?
That I think that it's completely backwards. And I think actually, if people come together, people can bring this about. As you say, I get that obviously I'm not personally religious, but I get that obviously it's a very important thing to a lot of people, and I get where that's coming from. But actually, I think it then comes down to the point, and how do you want your mother to be treated? How would you want your sister to be treated? How would you want your daughter to be treated? And would you want them to have this imposed upon them?
I want them to know the truth. Actually, I want them to know the truth. If it is
what is
true.
the truth?
Now, I realise it's difficult for people outside the church to understand this, but the whole point of the Catholic Church is we have this teaching which can't be just changed by vote. And you think, oh, well, these cardinals are going to vote on new teaching. But that's ridiculous. If they did that, they would simply be saying, oh, actually, we've been wrong all these years, all these centuries, and the Catholic Church doesn't actually exist. Because there's been this claim that the Catholic Church was founded by Christ and it's existed continuously and it's taught the same thing. If they say, well, no, we're all wrong,
Joseph,
well, you're also saying
what about
the Catholic Church
What about the
exist.
massive trouble and challenge we face of overpopulation on the planet? We're driving other species to extinction. There are going to be incredible problems with resources. And do we not need to think again about contraception?
Well, that's what they were saying when they were saying that they were going to have a new global ice age. But it hasn't quite happened. And now we know, in fact, that the global population is going to peak in a few decades and then go into decline. So I think this is a bit of a red herring.
Joseph, wait a minute. We're not talking about science here. We're talking about interpretation. And the Bible is an evolving story. You choose the bits you seem to like.
You don't choose the bits you seem to like. That's clear.
The Bible approves bigamy.
Neil, is your Joseph? I tell you what, Neil, is your eardrum okay there?
My sort of face is very wet and my eardrum is bursting. Calm down.
You're used to the newsroom.
Very quickly, Neil.
I think I find this a staggering debate, and I was incredibly disappointed that a man who I see as a good pope so let down the women of this planet. It is no coincidence that a week or so ago there was this horrendous story of a woman prosecuted in Northern Ireland over the fact that she underwent an abortion. This was about the pressure of the Catholic Church. It is about the way that still in vast areas of the world, South America, for instance, Panama, Southern Ireland, where the power of the Catholic Church, the male-dominated Catholic Church, means that this young woman here could not live there and have control over her own body, and that's a scandal. And you know what? If it continues, the rest of the world will increasingly turn against the Catholic Church.
We're going to have to leave it there.